So just wanted to ask you a little bit about osteochondral defects, because these are the types of issues that patients might be less aware of. So how might a osteochondral defect present to a patient? How would they sort of, what symptoms might they have?
Okay, so there are different ways that you can get an osteochondral defect. Just briefly to explain, an osteochondral defect is an area inside the knee joint. The knee is covered with cartilage, and under the cartilage is the bone. And if you detach a piece of cartilage and a bit of the underlying bone, that's an osteochondral defect. Osteo for bone, chondral, cartilage. So an osteochondral defect is an area where you're lacking a bit of the cartilage and the underlying bone. And there are different ways that you can get that, and different age groups that you see it in. In the childhood population, there's a disease that's called osteochondritis dissecans, and that's a problem, usually a problem of localized blood supply, where an area of the cartilage and bone loses its blood flow, and that little bit becomes sort of detached from the rest of the bone. And if the overlying cartilage remains intact, it doesn't just float away, it stays in place, and it may well heal up uneventfully, but it's just painful for a time. But sometimes the overlying cartilage also becomes loose or damaged, and then a fragment of cartilage and bone can break away from where it's supposed to be, leaving, in simple terminology, leaving a crater, which would be an osteochondral defect. In the adult population, it's more commonly as a result of localized trauma. So a sporting injury, or for big osteochondral defects, a fall from height, a road traffic accident, those sort of things. And the management strategy is dependent on the nature of the injury, how big the area of the defect is, and whether or not there's a loose fragment floating around inside the knee. So if you have a significant area of cartilage and underlying bone that detaches and moves out of the way from where it should be, it will then float around inside the knee. Patients will know that. Why? Because they will complain of pain from the detachment, but also pain and sometimes catching or locking, because that fragment will float around inside their knee and occasionally will jam between the bones and stop the knee from moving temporarily. It's quite painful, and the knee suddenly seizes up, and you think, oh my God, what's happened to my knee? I can't move it. And then after 5 or 10 minutes, that fragment will maybe float away again, and then the knee starts moving again. If that fragment of bone and cartilage is large enough, then the defect it leaves behind is going to cause trouble if left alone. And ideally, you'd want to find that fragment and put it back where it came from, and fix it back in place so that it heals up. That would give the patient the best chance for a good outcome in the long term. Sometimes that's feasible, and that would often be done with keyhole surgery or what we call minimally invasive surgery, which is a little bit more invasive than keyhole surgery. But essentially, the operation is very straightforward in terms of technique. The idea is to find the fragment, which sometimes not so easy. Find the fragment somewhere inside the knee, grab hold of it, put it back to where it came from, and then fix it into place. Usually we use a series of tiny little bioabsorbable darts or arrows, which skewer or kebab the fragment back into place. And they're buried underneath the cartilage so they don't irritate the knee joint. And they're a device, they're like little barbs on the arrow, which hold the bone and cartilage fragment in place until the body heals up. If you have an osteochondral defect and the fragment is not repairable, sometimes it's necessary still to find the fragment and fish it out because it's interfering with the function of the knee. But then the question is, what do you do about the defect? So again, there are options. Sometimes that defect will, if it's small, it will just fill in. The process of bleeding from the damaged area will result in a blood clot forming in the crater. And over a period of a few weeks and months, that blood clot, the body transforms that blood clot into what we call fibrocartilage. Now, the native knee, the normal knee, is covered, as I said before, with a coating of cartilage. The particular cartilage that you have covering your knee joint, all your joints, is called hyaline cartilage. Fibrocartilage is not exactly the same, but it's a pretty good alternative, which if it forms, it will do the job. Okay. So if the area of the defect is small and it will fill in of its own accord, and you get fibrocartilage that ends up in a relatively smooth surface, then you may not need to do anything more about it. But there are alternative options as well. We have over the years tried doing cartilage and bone transplantation. You can take little cylinders of bone and cartilage from other areas in the knee and then create little tunnels in the area where the cartilage is damaged, and then the cylinders of bone that you've harvested from elsewhere inside the knee, you can insert those into the area of damage, and you end up with something that looks a little bit like a cobblestoned area of cartilage, which will heal up perfectly well and provide a good functional outcome. There are more modern techniques as well. We now have the ability in the laboratory to grow cartilage. So if there's just an area of cartilage damage, but the underlying bone substance is actually in fairly good condition, then you can harvest some of the cartilage from elsewhere inside the knee, send it off to the laboratories where they can grow it into a larger volume of cartilage that you need enough to make something that will fill the defect. And then a second operation to implant it, to transplant it back into place. For the childhood population, these kids who have this blood flow issue, again, depending on how severe the condition is and where in the phases of the disease condition that we actually see them, will dictate how we manage them. Sometimes, just if it's in the early phases and there's been no detachment of that fragment, then it's just a question of reassurance for the family, maybe spending some time on crutches to relieve pressure on the knee, and let a healing process take place. The blood flow problem will often resolve itself, and blood flow will reintroduce itself to the area, and the area will heal up. Sometimes you need to do more than that, whether it's opening up the knee and freshening up the area of damage and then reimplanting the piece of bone and cartilage, or alternatives. I mean, there are variable alternatives that are available.
Okay, so just wanted to ask a little, because again, it's a sort of slightly, not say controversial, but area, and that's with the labral tears at the hip. So, in terms of what I guess the current thinking is around sort of labral tears, don't we need to do anything about them?
Yeah. Okay. So a labral tear, just to fill in some details, the hip is a ball and a socket joint. The socket, the bony socket, it's part of your pelvis. The socket, we are built with a little lip of cartilage that goes around the edge of the socket. It sort of deepens the socket a bit. And that's called the labrum. Latin for lip is labrum. And the lip of the cartilage is obviously softer than the bone of the socket, and it's therefore at risk of damage, whether it's fraying because of an aging process, or in a lot of people it comes about because of the anatomy of the hip joint. If you're unlucky in the way you're built, you have a little bit of excess bone on the surface of the ball, then that can cause what we call impingement. Through normal range of movement in the hip, this extra bit of bone is always banging onto this lip of cartilage, and over time it causes damage to that cartilage. So impingement can cause pain in the hip area in the younger population. Teenagers and 20-year-olds, often quite sporty people, may well have a problem with impingement in the hip because of excess bone resulting in damage to the cartilage lip. And depending on the level of symptoms and what's happened to the cartilage lip, then there are keyhole surgery techniques for the hip. So what we'd call hip arthroscopy is a technique to put a telescope inside the hip joint, a bit like knee keyhole surgery, to assess the area of damage and then to treat the area of damage. Now, whether that treatment involves reattaching a detached lip of cartilage or removing a damaged area of cartilage, that depends on the actual, specifically on the particular problem a person has. If there is excess bone on the ball, on the thigh bone side, then often the surgery involves shaving away that excess bone as well, so that the problem doesn't recur again. The algorithm often is that as I said, it's often late teens or 20-year-olds, sporty people who have hip pain. They'll often describe pain sort of at the front and the back of the hip. They often do what we call the C sign. Where's your pain? It's there. They use their hand as a C shape and they put it front and back. That's where I feel it. That's quite common. And examining those patients, they often have limitation to rotation and flexion, which tells you that they've got an impingement. There are different sorts of impingement inside the hip. You can have cam impingement or pincer impingement. These are variations of the same problem. Quite often, we'll get an MRI scan. Traditionally, historically, we used to get an MRI scan with an injection of dye into the hip because the dye will circulate around inside the capsule of the joint and it will identify if there's a tear in the lip of cartilage very clearly. You'll see because the dye enters into the torn lip of cartilage. Nowadays, the standard MRI scans, they're so accurate. In fact, you'll often see the lip of cartilage quite clearly on a non-enhanced scan. You don't need to have an injection of dye necessarily to see the damage to the cartilage lip and also the excess bone on the ball. Quite a lot of patients will then go through a diagnostic procedure, having an injection into the hip, just to confirm the diagnosis. If you inject into the hip some local anaesthetic with or without some steroid, and that even just temporarily relieves their symptoms, that helps to confirm in your mind and also your surgeon's mind that it's actually coming from the hip joint, it's coming from that pathology. And then depending on the level of your symptoms and your age and your aspirations, then maybe your surgeon will recommend keyhole surgery to try and resolve the problem.
Okay. And I say, particularly in the younger, sporty population, it's probably worth just sort of mentioning that that a lot of people will have these findings, won't they, on scan, particularly like footballers and stuff. It's quite common, Yeah,
because the sort of extremes of movement that go through being, a sporty elite athlete, all you have to do is watch the Premier League and see how much these guys stretch to reach the ball, to do the overhead kicks, quite acrobatic. They're putting an awful lot of stress on their hip joint. They're moving it into quite, the very limits of rotation and flexion in order to play their sport, and that's going to repetitively traumatize the area on the edge of the socket. So it's more of an elite athlete sort of problem. And it goes also hand in hand with abnormalities of development of the hip. So some of the patients who have this sort of problem, not only do they have a cartilage problem on the lip of their socket, they may actually have been born with maybe a very shallow socket to the hip joint, something called hip dysplasia. So that's where the way the ball and socket was made from birth predisposes them to a cartilage problem. So I'm not involved in that sort of surgery myself, but I do have colleagues who are sometimes involved in these, treating these young elite athletes and recommending surgery to realign the hip joints, what we call a periacetabular osteotomy. So a surgery to actually realign where the socket is to improve what we call coverage, the amount that the socket covers the ball. If you're born with a shallow socket, then that will predispose more to damage on the lip of the socket. If you catch it early enough and do a surgical procedure to realign the socket, you'll actually give the weight-bearing zone of the socket, it'll be a larger weight-bearing portion, and that will spread the load better and prevent deterioration in the future. So thank you very much for having me today. It's been really great to talk through a number of subjects that we've covered, quite a large area of hip and knee surgery. And I hope that the viewers have enjoyed this. And if you could remember to review and subscribe, that would be really helpful. See you next time.